Freya has put us on the path, and the bearer, that is time, must do the rest. For all calamities counsel and help may be found, but Ralda intends that we search for them ourselves, in order that we should become strong and wise.
Hi everyone, this is going to be another installment of the What is Codex Oera Linda series. Once again, I'll be presenting the narrative of the manuscript at face value without yet addressing its authenticity. Last time, we learned about the civil war between Minerva and Kelta, circa 1630 BCE, and we left off where Jon and his fleet had fled together with Minerva, taking the sacred lamps and the maidens of the Burgs Valhallagara, likely in the modern-day region of Walcheren in the Dutch province Zeeland, and Vlieburg, located somewhere across the river Scheldt, possibly at the town of Oostburg in the same province. Kelta also had to flee, going first to the south to seek assistance from the Gola priests, then returning northward by sea with a fleet of Phoenician ships and setting up a burg at Karnak in Brittany, from which she reestablished rule over her followers, most of whom had been banished after the war to work in the tin mines. Over time, however, she lost power to the Gola, whose culture went on to dominate nearly all of Europe and the British Isles for many centuries thereafter, only losing its grip when the Roman Republic conquered the lands through what are called the Gallic Wars between roughly the years 60 and 50 BCE. As is so often the case in Codex Oera Linda, the story of Minerva and Jon continues with a flash forward in time to 10 years after the civil war between the two Burgmaids, when 3 ships sail into the Flea Lake and recount what became of Jon and Minerva after they left. When Jon reached the Middle Sea, the reports of the Gola had preceded him everywhere, so that he was not safe anywhere on the coast of the near Greeklands. Thus, he crossed over with his fleet to Lydia, that is, Lyda's land. There, the black people wanted to capture and eat them. The Middle Sea is the Mediterranean. The Gola are the pagan priests who had assisted Kelta in her war, and for whom the lands of Gaul were later named. The near Greeklands is the region of what we now call Italy, and Lydia is North Africa. After sailing on in search of a hospitable refuge, they reached the waters off the island of Tyre, at the far end of the Mediterranean, off the coast of what is now the country of Lebanon. But this was too near the homeland of the Gola, and Minerva, who in her role as Burgmaid had learned much about the tyrannical priestly class of the Phoenicians, warned Jon to sail away quickly in search of a safer harbor. As they set sail once again, the Tyrian navy pursued them and seized one of Jon's ships, but the fleet continued on towards the far Greeklands, what is now called Greece, and at long last discovered a natural harbor in the region of Attica, probably at Piraeus. As exhausted as the people aboard the ships were from their long travels and various flights from danger, as well as the war they had fought in their homeland, Jon was so furious at the Phoenicians that he was not content to settle down. He put out a call for any willing man to follow him and take revenge. Then he and his followers departed, eventually setting up base in what are now called the Ionian Islands, where they lived as pirates, plundering any Phoenician vessel or settlement they could reach. Meanwhile, Minerva and the rest of the people who had fled with them remained in Attica, where they built a burg a few miles inland, which they called Altenia, meaning citadel of allies, the Frias word for allies being Ota. Relations between Minerva and the princes and priests of Attica were strained, because the Frya colonists held no slaves and followed laws based on equal justice for all. When the native Greeks became enamored of the ideas of freedom and justice for all, their leaders sought to sully the reputation of Minerva in order to retain control over a population that was beginning to question their own oppression. I'll end with an excerpt from the writings of Minno, a sea king who I introduced in an earlier video as part of the series on the laws of Codex Oera Linda, which illustrates the contentious nature of their relationship and the devious use the rulers made of Minerva's name by deifying it after her passing to reassert their mastery over the Greeks. Chapter 4f, from Minno's writings. When Helenia, also called Helenia, whose given name was Minerva, meaning my inheritance, was well established in the land, and the Greeks loved her almost as much as her own folk, there came a group of princes and priests to the burg, and asked Minerva where her Urfa, her inheritance, lay. Helenia answered,
Minerva, I bear in my bosom. What I have inherited is the love of wisdom, justice and freedom. Were I to lose that, I would be like the meanest of your slaves. For now, I give advice freely, but then I would sell it.
The lords left and called mockingly, Your obedient servants, wise Helenia. But their ridicule went amiss, for the folk, who loved her and heeded her, took up this name as a title of honor. When they realized that they had missed their mark, the princes and priests began to denigrate her, saying she had bewitched the people. But our folk and the good Greeks avowed everywhere that it was slander. Once they came and asked, So, if you are not a sorceress, what then is the purpose of the eggs you always have with you? Minerva answered,
These eggs are the symbol of Fryas' councils, in which our future and that of all humankind lies concealed. Time must hatch them, and we must see that they come to no harm.
The priests replied, Well said, but what of the hound at your right hand? Helenia answered,
Does not the shepherd have a sheepdog to keep his flock together? Like the dog in the service of the shepherd, I am in Fryas' service. I must watch over her flock.
That makes sense indeed, said the priests. But tell us, what is the meaning of the night owl that sits always upon your head? Is that light-shunning creature perhaps the sign of your clairvoyance?
No,
answered Helenia.
He helps me remember that a certain breed of people wanders the earth, who, just as he, house themselves in temples and caves, gnawing in the dark. Though not as he, to help rid us of mice and other pests, but rather to contrive deceits, to rob other peoples of their knowledge, so they can more easily lay hold of them to make them slaves and suck their blood like leeches.
Once they came with a crowd of people. Plague had come over the land, and they said, We are all making offerings to the gods, so that they might ward off the plague. Will you not help us to calm their wrath? Or did you yourself bring the plague over the land with your arts?
No,
said Minerva.
But I know no gods who are doers of evil. Therefore I cannot entreat them to become better. I know only one God, that is Ralda's spirit. And because God means good, he also does no evil.
Where then does the evil come from? The priests asked.
All of the evil comes from yourselves, and from the stupidity of the people who walk willingly into your trap.
If, then, your supreme being is so very good, why does he not prevent evil? The priests asked. Helenia answered,
Frya has put us on the path, and the bearer, that is time, must do the rest. For all calamities counsel and help may be found, but Ralda intends that we search for them ourselves, in order that we should become strong and wise. If we refuse, he lets our boils fester, so that we should experience the results of wise and foolish deeds.
One prince replied, I would think it better to simply ward off disaster.
Of course you would,
Helenia answered,
because then the people would remain like tame sheep. You and the priests would want to guard them, but also to shear them and lead them to the slaughter. Such, though, is not the will of our supreme being. He wills that we help one another, but also that all should be free and become wise. This we desire as well, which is why our folk elects our leaders, aldermen, councillors, and all chieftains and masters from the wisest of the good people, so that all will do their best to become wise and good. Doing thus, we shall come to know and to teach the people that wisdom and wise deeds alone lead to salvation.
That is quite a notion, said the priests. But if you assert that the plague is a result of our ignorance, then would Helenia be so good as to lend us somewhat of the new light of which she is so proud?
Yes,
Helenia said.
Crows and other birds feed only on foul carrion, whereas the plague likes not only foul carrion, but also foul morals, customs, and habits. You must rid yourselves of these habits, and see that you all become pure inside and out.
We want to believe that your counsel is good, said the priests. But tell us, how are we supposed to improve all the people under our rule? At this, Helenia rose from her seat and declared,
The sparrows follow the sower, the folks their good leaders. Therefore you ought to begin by making yourselves so pure that you may look inward and outward without reddening in shame before your own conscience. But instead of purifying the people, you have invented foul feasts where they drink so excessively that they end up wallowing in the mud like pigs, for you to satisfy your vile lusts.
The people began to yell and jeer, so that the priests did not dare resume the debate. Now, one might expect that they would have mobilized the people everywhere to drive us altogether from the land. But no, instead of raising the alarm, they went to every corner, even to the near Greeklands, all the way to the Alps, declaring that it had pleased the Most High God to send among them his wise daughter Minerva, also named Helenia, across the sea upon the shell of a whelk, to give them good counsel, and that whosoever would hear her should become rich and happy, and eventually should rule the whole kingdom of earth. They placed statues of her on their altars, or sold them to the simple people. They proclaimed counsels everywhere that she had never given, and told of miracles that she had never performed. Through cunning, they made themselves masters of our laws and customs, and through lies managed to blur and distort them all. They also placed maidens under their care, pretending these were under the care of Vesta, our first honorable mother, to watch over the divine light. But that flame they themselves had kindled, and instead of properly educating these young maidens and sending them amongst the people to nurse the sick and teach the children, they kept them ignorant and dim by the light, and did not allow them to come outside. The maidens were also used as counselors, but the counsel they gave only seemed to come from their own lips. In reality, they were no more than the mouthpiece through which the priests promulgated their own desires. When Helenia died, we wished to choose another mother. Some wanted to go to Fryasland to ask one there, but the priests, who had regained power over their people, would not permit it, and accused us before their people of impiety.